So I think my educational journey was typically what happens in Bengali family. First of all, there's a huge emphasis on academics, and you have to do your higher studies, and you have to do well. And I remember actually when unbelievably, when I was leaving school, when I finished class 10, I wanted to go into the arts stream. And my father said, no, don't give up mathematics, because in case you want to do something later on with the sciences, if you don't have mathematics, you won't be able to do it. So I went through the eco math stats stream, because that to me that was like, okay, in between. It was neither the pure, it was not the sciences, but yes, there was mathematics. And then I applied for undergraduate college in the US, and since I was doing this eco math stats combination in 11-12, I applied for economics and mathematics double major there. And yeah, I ended up getting a degree in economics and mathematics. And while doing that, I was recruited for a master's program in applied mathematics. And then my father taught at the MBA program at Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata. So like he was a big proponent of MBAs. Um, Both my brothers did the MBA, so then I also ended up doing my MBA at McGill. And yeah, so I was more of a professional student because I didn't want to get into the world of work. So I thought the longer I can prolong this, I enjoyed being a student. So I think that's why I ended up doing all those studies. But then while doing it, I said, okay, eventually I have to work. And the thing that I found most interesting while doing the MBA was the advertising. The course on advertising, I used to see a lot of ads. And I used to find those fascinating. I thought it'd be great to try and make these, and that's how I. Uh,
Right. So you joined Ogilvy. You started with
Yeah.
Ogilvy. You started your advertising journey with Ogilvy.
Yeah. I No, I did not. I started my advertising journey with Response Advertising in
Okay.
Kolkata with
Yes.
Ram Ray,
Mm.
and from there I moved to Ogilvy Kolkata and then Ogilvy Bombay. I've spent, when I was around 5 or 6, my father took up a job in Manchester, England, so we were there for like 2.5 years. So maybe my love for English started over there. No, because I was just learning basic English when I went there, and then I was put in an English school. And when you're that age, I think you pick up languages very fast. Class 6 and 7, I did in Arusha, Tanzania, and that was a absolutely wonderful experience for me. Because I think in there's a it's a much more like, at least the schools that I went to, like in Arusha, the school that I went to, it was not exactly an international school, but there were a lot of international faculty, staff, teachers, and students there, apart from majority being locals. So that gave an environment where it was a one was able to mix with people from so many different cultures, and more than that, some of these teachers had wonderful ideas. So also we had facilities. We had horse riding in the school, so I learned to do horse riding when I was there. So that was another fantastic experience that I had. And when I was there also, one of our neighbors introduced me to the Chronicles of Narnia.
Okay.
C.S. Lewis. There's a book, The Horse and His Boy, and others. So, that was the same time that I was learning to ride, and I was riding horses, and I read this book about this horse animal. So it was like a very magical experience for me, combining the fictional world with my real life. And it was a beautiful. I mean, Tanzania has Serengeti, and you have which is the world's largest wildlife sanctuary. So seen so much wildlife there, and um, and the place itself was absolutely beautiful. There was Mount Kilimanjaro, which was about not very far away from there. So I remember we did a trek up Mount Kilimanjaro. There's Mount Meru, which is another mountain nearby, and our school took us on a trek, and that was wonderful. And we had a swimming pool in the school, so I did swimming over there. We did a bit of agriculture, so to speak. I think the first thing that I ever grew was a tomato plant. So all of these things, I mean, because also there was a lot of open space. I mean, it was a beautiful town surrounded by, there was rivers and mountains and coffee plantation. I remember one of my teachers, she lived on a coffee plantation. She was an American lady, and she also used to, be interested in teaching us riding, though we had other people for riding. And she once said that on a Sunday, we would all ride, because we used to ride in and around the school. But one Sunday we all rode to her farm. And, through that was also, it was a few hours riding. We never done that. So those were like sort of really cherished memories.
Right. And how did acting and modeling happen?
So acting and modeling kind of happened somewhat organically. I had done a very little bit of acting when I was in school. I remember when I was so I did part of my schooling in Arusha, Tanzania, in Africa, of course. And when I was in class six over there, my teacher told me to write a play, and that was also my sort of first foray into writing fiction in that sense. And that's what I've always said, that at that age you don't know that you can't do something. So my teachers gave me like a paragraph, like a plot summary, and said, write, make a play out of this. And I did. And that was performed as the annual play. And I also had a part in it. So I think that was my first experience of being a writer and an actor. Other than that, in my college in the US and all that, I didn't do any acting. But when I was in advertising and I moved to Bombay, even before moving to Bombay, because I was in the advertising world, people asked me to do modeling for certain things. I mean, initially, a lot of it was free stuff, and some. I don't know if you know this magazine, Shananda.
Yes.
Yes. So I've appeared on every time they needed a guy for whatever story they were doing, like about a couple or whatever. So it was, me. So at one point in time, I was on the cover of this magazine a number of times. Yeah, so that was also one of my beginning forays into modeling. And then I moved to Bombay. I did quite a few ads. I remember at that time this wills made for each other was a very big thing. And they, of course, you couldn't advertise cigarettes, but they had this diary,
Yes.
which was like a very coveted diary in
Yes.
those days. So I remember Sushma Reddy was a big model at that time. So Sushma Reddy and I did that wills made for each other diary, and various other things. I mean, then I also did Peter England with Kareena Kapoor, which was shot by directed by Pradeep Sarkar, and yeah, many other things. You were mentioning this Kodak ad, so I did the Kodak. I had gone for a play reading in Bombay. Like, basically somebody has written a script and they wanted to see how it sounds. So at the play reading, there was this girl who was also one of the actors reading it. And then after that, it was very funny. Literally, I was walking down the street and I bumped into that girl again. And she said, "Hey, do you want to do a play?" And I said, "Yes." And so I found myself in this play, Barefoot, in Mumbai, which was an adaptation of Barefoot in the Park by Neil Simon. So that was my first play. So it was a comedy. I had a great time. I remember I was extremely nervous when I had to get up on during for the first few shows, because it was the first time that I was really going to be, except for the school play, but it didn't feel like there was I was on stage. I was not nervous at all then. But here I was extremely nervous for the first few shows, and then after that I really started enjoying being on stage and playing around with the lines and the scene and all of that. So it became, and then later on I did Life of Gautama Buddha.
Okay.
And that was also interesting. At one point in time I started growing my hair long. And just when I did that, somebody had come from Delhi to Bombay looking for someone, with a certain look and with long hair. So I remember I was called for this audition, and even before I auditioned, this director said, "Don't cut your hair." I said, "Okay." So, and then I was in a full time job, and she said, "You need to come to Delhi for a month for rehearsals." So I spoke to my boss, and he said, "Yeah, okay." So I went to Delhi and I started rehearsing for this, and that was the year of 9/11.
Okay.
And I remember we were flying to the US to perform the play. We flew to London, and from London we took off. And many hours later, the captain said we're landing.
It was post 9/11.
No,
Okay.
it was. I mean, we didn't know it was on that day. And when they said fasten your seatbelts, we're landing in London, and we'd taken off from London hours ago. So like I remember exchanging glances with other passengers. The captain has said it wrong because we should be landing in Washington D.C. And then after we landed, they made the announcement that this thing has happened. There's been these hijackers, and I was on United Airlines, which was one of the airlines which had been hijacked. So that's why they were keeping it very hush hush on the flight. Then landed in London, and then spent a few days there. Came back to India. In Hindi, I did many years ago. I did this film called Chattopadhyay, directed by Kumar Shani, which was based
you were
on
there?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is around the year 99, I think.
Yes.
So that was in Hindi. At that time, I didn't know Hindi much at all, but I learned it for the play. And yeah, and recently I've actually been working and studying more Hindi so that I can be absolutely, I have a Hindi teacher with whom I do online classes. A lot of it is about diction, but he's also himself an actor. So that we usually what we do is that we do an imaginary scene. Like he says, "You're this character, I'm this character." We just start like he just says, he obviously through the way he addresses me, he makes me into whatever character, and so that's also like a very creative way of learning the language. So I think that I was always an English nut from, I mentioned to you that I suddenly found myself in school in England and I learned the language overnight. So, and I was always fascinated with words. Every time I came across a word I didn't know, I would ask my parents, and they gave me a dictionary. They said, do your own research, and I would always be fascinated because uh, I got to travel abroad, and I knew Bengali and I knew English, and I'd be exposed to other languages, and I'd always be fascinated when I'd come across words which was similar in say Bengali and Italian or whatever in English and Bengali. And so I think that's where I started developing an interest, and I learned that there's something called the Proto-Indo-European uh, language family from which many of the Indian and European languages. There are Indian words, but one word which I'm thinking of right now is this word doolally.
Okay.
Like there was this phrase like going doolally, which was basically means going mad. And the way this came about was that there was this sort of a sanatorium built for British soldiers in Deolali in Maharashtra.
Okay.
And these were, what are called shell shocked soldiers. So they were affected, they would be mentally affected, and then, they would come here, and eventually from Deolali, they would be sent back to England. So, and there would be whatever, like to put it in, like go a bit cuckoo. So it was referred to as going doolally.
Okay.
Or, if you take the word punch, like the drink, it comes from punch
Okay. So
because it
five
was basically,
ingredients.
5 ingredients. So, yeah, time pass,
Time
which has
pass,
become such an
yes.
Indian word.
Pass out.
Pass out.
Yes.
Yeah, graduate.
Yes. Pass
Yeah.
out is a very common this thing.
Yeah.
Very again, like very is also a very this
Yeah.
thing among Bengali Indians.
And the most Bengali English word is nonsense,
Nonsense. Yes.
which is for a Bengali, it's like the biggest insult. So it's such a mild word in normal English, but if you say nonsense on a bus during a fight, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was working in Ogilvy, and while Hindi is sort of the language that is most important in the world of advertising in Bombay. Of course, English is also important. So for anything English, people always came to me. And then one of my colleagues said, "Why don't you do something?" Because I had this terrible habit of correcting people's English. So he said, "Why don't you do something with that? Why don't you, do something? Create a." He said, "Start a blog." So I started a blog initially. Then this is 2018, and that's when they said, video is the next big thing. Now, of course, today we know now that video is everything now. So at that time, so I said, okay. I decided that in 2019, January 1st, I would launch this channel, and I would give it a shot for 1 year and see if it works or not. And every week, I would make a video about some aspect of the English language. And yeah, so now we're in 2026 and it's still going strong. Yeah.
And how did the book happen? Like
The book
was it
happened
your
because
decision?
the publisher actually saw the English Nut, and I got an inbox message one day, and saying that would you be interested in writing a book, because the topics that you cover here seem perfect for a book. So I said, yeah. Then we started talking and negotiating and drew up a contract. Yourself handy at selling good ale and bright brandy. But the fact is, your liquor makes everyone sicker. I tell you this, I, your friend Andy. So basically, this is the kind of repartee that happened with limericks. Minor surgery, they didn't have anesthetic available to them, so they would literally bite the bullet to stop themselves from screaming. That was one aspect of it. The other aspect was that if they were being punished for whatever misdemeanor while in the army, they would be flogged, and it was a matter of pride not to scream out. So there again, they would supposedly bite the bullet. So today, biting the bullet, I suppose you know what it means, that when you have to do something difficult, and you just say, okay, let me just bite the bullet and do it. So that's how it's used today. Then, of course, initially, I was very slow initially, because advertising is a very demanding job, and I was not able to progress very fast with the chapter. Then once I stopped working full time, then I quickly finished the book.
When did you start? In which year did you start?
I don't. Which year would it be? Maybe
COVID.
no. We signed the contract before COVID. Maybe 2000. Soon, 2019 beginning is when COVID started. 2020.
Yes.
February.
Yes.
So I think that towards the end of 2019 is when I think that I would have started.
Okay.
And then we went into COVID, and work life actually became crazy, because trying to keep an ad agency afloat when there's hardly any advertising happening and all of that, it was actually much much tougher. And trying to, for example, we managed to create certain ad films and all that even while there was COVID and lockdown happening. So all my time went in that. And I remember it. I remember initially the publisher was following up with me, and I said, "Look, I'm going to need more time, because I've become even slower in terms of my writing with the lockdown." So yeah, so then the lockdown ended, and I think almost like 2.5, 3 years ago is when I said, priority, I'm going to finish the manuscript, and I submitted it. And then, of course, the publishers took a very long time to, which this is my first book, so I didn't know that the world of publishing moves at a very slow pace. So yeah, and then finally, early this year, it and the editor who had commissioned it left. And there was a new editor who came in. And I said, look, it's really been very long. So she said, let me see what I can do. And then one day she called me and said, it's on. And though this had been sitting there for so long, then the editing process was like furious. So she would, uh, and typically on a Friday, I would get chapters and be asked by Monday. So I felt like I was in back to advertising, where on a Friday your client calls you and says, "I need this on Monday morning." So your weekend is suddenly gone. Your weekend you're working. So I would do that, and then but I knew that it was in my interest because my book had to come out. Uh, so yeah, so we I think from around April, May, June we worked on editing the book, and beginning of July it was published. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been a great ride because also I discovered I was wondering how is one supposed to what is one supposed to do when one's book comes out. So I talked to various I discovered I have a number of friends and acquaintances who are authors. So I asked them what to do. So they said you've got to market your own book. And so I started that process. And they said I asked what does that entail? They said social media. So I had that covered with the English nut.
So yeah, limericks are poems with 5 lines. The first, second, and the fifth line are longer and they rhyme with each other, and the third and fourth lines are shorter and they rhyme with each other. And they're usually humorous, sometimes a bit naughty, but they are a very old form of poetry. There's somebody called Edward Lear who's considered the father of the limerick. He came up with many interesting limericks in a book called The Book of Nonsense, because very often limericks are nonsense that is fun. His limericks were so popular at one time, they were called, his surname was Lear, so they called them lyrics because of that. So let me try and remember. One of his limericks is, there was a young lady from Niger who smiled as she rode on a tiger. They returned from the ride with the lady inside and the smile on the face of the tiger. So yeah, so there are many, and there are many limericks that start with "there was a young lady," and some of them are quite naughty, so I won't get into those. But even many of us, especially me, in nursery school, we learnt something which was a limerick. Does anybody know what that would be? What is the nursery school limerick? Yeah, I can't hear. Okay, we'll do it later. Yeah. Okay, not so there's something called hickory dick that goes hickory dickory dock. The mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck one, the mouse came. The clock struck one, and down he run, hickory dickory dock. So that's the earliest limerick that many of us learn at a very young age. These actually started out in the 1600s or even earlier as drinking songs. So when men went to the pub to drink, they would sing these songs, or just to have fun. So there's a place. So where does this word limerick come from? Do you know which country? It comes from Ireland, right? So there's a place called Limerick in Ireland where this form was popularized, and there's a book of very very old limericks which were written in Irish and then later translated into English, where there was repartee between the drinkers and the pub owners. Let me try and remember. So there was one guy called Sean O'Twama who had a pub, and so he recites this particular. Let me look it up in my book so I don't get it wrong. So he says one day at his pub, I sell the best brandy and sherry to make all my customers merry. But at times their finances run short as it chances, and then I feel very sad, very. So this is what he says, and everybody cheers, all his customers cheer.
So, this is my book, The Stories of Words and Phrases, and as the title tells you, these are the origins of everyday words and phrases. We use a lot of words like blockbuster or berserk or lunatic or, assassin. They all have fascinating stories. Uh, like there's a connection between the word assassin and hashish, the drug. Uh, Berserk is about these Norse soldiers who used to also be high on some kind of a substance, and they would, they would sort of rush towards their enemy in a very fierce and enraged fashion, which was very, very scary, and that's how they managed to win their battles. And that's why today we say going berserk. Every word, not every word has an interesting, but many, many words have very interesting uh, origins. A lot of the phrases that we use, like green with envy. A lot of these phrases come from were first used by Shakespeare. So Shakespeare has contributed a lot to to the language, and I've covered a number of these phrases in this book. So yeah, I mean, you just have to, if you are interested in the language, and if you love language in general, and the great thing is that each chapter is just a few pages long. So even if you're a person who's daunted by big fat books, this is a very easy read. But also it's very well researched. So you have the sources of my research mentioned at the end of the book as well. So I think that yeah, you get solid, correct information, but it's put across. I had interviewed Shashi Tharoor for The English Nut, and therefore I had a connection with him. So when this book was coming out, I approached him, and he very graciously agreed to write a foreword. And he wrote a very thorough foreword, like it was, wasn't a superficial thing. He read the book and then he wrote it. And the other person that I've interviewed for The English Nut is Ruskin Bond. So I had also approached him, and I told him that even if you can write one or two sentences, that's a blessing for my book, literally, because I'm not one of those. I'm not a person who hero worships, or I'm not a fanboy. But I think when I interviewed Ruskin Bond, I really felt like a fanboy, and like he's such a sort of a charming person, and he's like this grandfather everybody would like to have. So, and yeah, so I was so happy that, and in fact his quote came in very late in the process, when it was about to go to print, but the publisher said, don't worry, we will put it in whenever it comes. uh, yeah, so then it came at the last minute, and there's a excerpt from it, and on the back cover, and also the paragraph that he wrote is inside one of the first few pages of the book. So yeah, it meant a lot to me. And I've been from advertising, where we're all constantly looking at the design and what the design says about something. So I said, look, I feel that it needs to have a more premium and maybe even a slightly vintage look to it. And I think I just mentioned, for example, like the New Yorker font, or the New Yorker magazine. So then they went back, and they came back.
I actually like this font.
Yeah,
The New
yeah,
Yorker
it's so
font. It's
lovely.
very, yes.
So it was so it was a similar kind of a layout with illustrations, but yeah, I think that the color has been changed, and it's given this kind of a mottled, again, like a parchment kind of a look, and then this font has a very antique feel to it.
Yes. And the usage of illustrations also, like New
Yes.
Yorker uses a lot of illustrations.
Right, right. So I think that so one reality is that language is always evolving.
Yes.
Yesterday's slang is today's formal English. So I'm not saying that language has to stand still, but at the same time, in fact, scrolling on social media is kind of there's more and more evidence that actually leads to not only to poor attention span, but to mental health issues, even because our brains were never uh, developed to, in matter of seconds, to be exposed to so many different kinds of, if you wake up in the morning and start scrolling on your phone, you're being bombarded by so many diverse kinds of stimuli. Your brain is not able to handle it, and that creates a lot of problems for us. So in fact, a lot of mental health experts say that at least the first hour after you get up, don't scroll, and stop doing that an hour before you go to. But and also, I read a very interesting article that the fact that traditional books, which is long form reading, is actually an antidote. So these mental health issues that are cropping up because of scrolling uh, can be cured to a great extent, can be corrected by reading books. So, this traditional knowing language properly is very good, but because I think that our ability to communicate well in languages is very important to our success in work or in life, I would say. And I think it's all interlinked. Your use of language, your intelligence, all of it is linked. I think they say that one of the great ways to develop your brain, or in old age to keep your brain from deteriorating, is to learn a new language. So I think that even if you're not learning a foreign language, if you know some English, and just working on improving that is going to be something that's very beneficial for your brain, for your communication skills, for your career, for everything. And also, if you, I mean, we've all learned to do things the hard way, so to speak.
Yes.
And ChatGPT is a great tool for us. But if you are just, for example, going to get ChatGPT to do your homework, you're never going to learn, because it's just coming to you instantly. Of course, there are errors in it, but I'm saying, leaving even the errors aside, if you are just copying and pasting that onto a Word document and submitting it, then after a while in fact, I was reading that there is some research that they've done, that already the use of such large language models and other forms of AI has had an impact of making us more stupid, so to speak, because it makes you mentally lazy, because
Yes,
you're
that is
not
also.
thinking like, okay, how do I put this sentence together? If there's a AI that's going to give it to you instantly, then the incentive to actually think and do it yourself becomes less. But it's very important, because otherwise our brains will become a bit rusty. Yeah. And there is a lot of very wonderful content on social media. I have to say, like, I learn and read. I read so many completely new things, and I learn so much. But there's also a lot of rubbish. And I think that for young people, it's so important to monitor their usage of social media. So, because that's it, everybody, even in England, people feel that the way that they are speaking it is the way to speak. Is not the case, and we talk about the Queen's English, right? So that is what the aristocracy and the royalty and nobility in England spoke. Uh, Maybe that's also Shakespearean English. We should look at, I mean, it's a wonderful gift that we have, that it's a language which is a linked language for the entire world. That's the reality. I mean, English has been accepted as the linked language for the whole world. So if we have a history of English in this country, we should preserve it, and we should build on it, while also giving importance to our mother tongue. I'm not for a moment saying we shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, to me, Bengali is my mother tongue. But we've always learned, growing up, I learned both English and Bengali at home, which has been a great advantage for me.